Despite our best efforts, our best endeavours, West Ham United may not be able to avoid relegation. Um, we just may not be able to pick up enough points in the Premier League this season to do that. But despite that, there may still be a way to avoid the drop. And if it happens, it'll be a big thanks to financial fair play and profitability and sustainability rules. You see, with 115 charges of FFP failure levied against Man City, a decision is likely to be reached before this season ends as to whether they're guilty of these breaches or not. And if that decision goes against Man City, the penalty could be quite severe. Severe enough for Man City to be docked enough points to see them potentially drop into the relegation zone, thus saving West Ham. Could it happen? It's entirely possible. Man City, the most dominant English club of the modern era, is facing its biggest test off the pitch after the investigation by the Premier League. This is, I guess, kind of the most consequential legal battle English football has faced. The Premier League has set a precedent for clubs who fall foul of PSR. I'll go into those in a moment. Now, if you don't already know what FFP is, or if you want to have a little reminder, FFP was introduced by UEFA to stop clubs from spending beyond their means. The idea was quite simple. Clubs must broadly balance football-related income against expenditure. They must not artificially inflate revenue. They must not hide costs, and they must provide accurate financial information. The Premier League's version is called PSR, Profitability and Sustainability, which is going to be replaced at the end of this season anyway. But the principles are the same: transparency, sustainability, competitive fairness. The idea is to protect clubs from financial collapse and maintain some level of competitive fairness. Now, the Premier League announced the charges against Man City in February 2023, following a 4-year investigation. The alleged breaches cover a 9-year period from 2009 to 2018. Now, according to multiple reports, City have been accused of inaccurate financial reporting, misreporting managerial and player payments. In other words, they were accused of hiding payments where it is claimed that payments to managers or players were routed through third parties to avoid being recorded properly. Apparently, they inflated their sponsorship deals. It includes claims that certain sponsors linked to Abu Dhabi were paying more on paper than in reality, artificially boosting revenue. Apparently, they were misrepresenting revenue. Man City are accused of providing inaccurate details about revenue, sponsorship deals, and operating costs, again between 2009 and 2018. And apparently, they failed to comply fully with the Premier League's investigations. Now, Man City, of course, deny all these charges and have been fighting them quite fiercely. The allegations were first brought to light after leaked documents suggested irregularities in their sponsorship structures. Now, the hearing concluded in December 2024, but as we know, everything takes an awful long time with the Premier League, and both Man City and the Premier League are still awaiting the actual final outcome. Now, I said there were precedents set beforehand, and they included the likes of Everton, who in 2023 were deducted 10 points. They were reduced to 6 after appeal. But in April 2024, they were found guilty again of separate PSR charges and deducted a further 2 points. Everton at the time exceeded allowable £105 million losses over a rolling 3-year period. They were overspending on transfers. The stadium construction costs were not fully exempt. There was poor player trading, and there was a high wage to turnover ratio. Everton at the time fell into a relegation battle they otherwise could have avoided. And I guess Everton, well, they became the Premier League's test case, proving that the Premier League were willing to act when PSR was broken. Nottingham Forest were then punished in March 2024, who were deducted 4 points. They overspent after getting promotion back into the Premier League. They had a huge influx of signings, high amortization rate costs, and insufficient player sales to balance their books. Forest argued that they were being penalised for trying to survive in the Premier League, but the Commission still found them guilty. The 4-point deduction dropped them into the relegation zone as well, but just like Everton, they survived that scare. And Forest, that case proved that the Premier League were willing to punish even newly promoted clubs. Then there was Leicester City, who were charged despite dropping into the Championship. In March 2024, they were charged for PSR breaches committed while still a Premier League club. Leicester's relegation in 2023 triggered a collapse in revenue, high wages still on the books, transfer losses, a failure to sell players quickly enough, again to balance the books. And that's something that if West Ham do get relegated could be something that they might have to fear, especially with the published or the accounts about to be published that we're in deep financial trouble. Now, in terms of Leicester's case, that was heard in the 24-25 season, and Leicester received a points deduction in the Championship, despite the fact that the penalties were happened in the Premier League. And that impacted their promotion push. They were warned further penalties could follow should they return to the Premier League. Now, this case has proved that the Premier League can punish clubs even after they drop out of the Premier League itself. In addition to Man City, there are other clubs that are under investigation. Chelsea are one of the clubs who are being investigated. That began in the 23-24 season after the new ownership self-reported irregularities from the Abramovich era. Allegations there include undisclosed payments, third-party transactions, and again, potentially hidden wages or fees. Now, the scale of the Chelsea investigation is significant. UEFA already fined them for incomplete financial reporting. Chelsea's case is ongoing and could be the next major PSR story. And there are other clubs, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Man United. They've all received warnings in the past, but these clubs have not yet been charged. But they have all been publicly warned about PSR limits. They've all admitted that they're operating on the edge, and they've all had to sell players in order to comply. Now, this shows how restrictive PSR has become, even for big clubs. Is that true? Well, I guess if they all get banned, or if they all get if they all get found guilty and they have points deducted, then yes, even the big clubs will suffer. In fact, it's been suggested that Aston Villa are actually the next big club to fall foul after Chelsea of PSR rules, and apparently they've already overstepped the mark that they could be the next big club to receive severe financial penalties. So what are the chances of Man City being found guilty? Let's go back to them for a moment. I guess the volume of charges is unprecedented. 115 charges over 9 years suggests that the Premier League believes it's got substantial evidence. I guess the case is extremely complex. The delay in the verdict, more than a year after the hearing ended, reflects the scale of documentation and legal arguments involved. City have a world-class legal representation. They've beaten UEFA before, overturning a Champions League ban in 2020. Now, multiple financial experts, however, have publicly stated that if City are found guilty, a major points deduction is the most likely outcome. But I guess proving intent is difficult, and many of the charges are going to hinge on whether City knowingly misled the regulators. I guess the realistic assessment is that there is a genuine possibility of guilt on at least some of these charges. There's a big possibility that the full conviction on all 115 charges is unlikely, and a partial conviction could still lead to a huge points deduction. But apart from a points deduction, how else can they be penalised? Well, there's the stripping of titles, which might seem kind of highly unlikely. Man City may get away with just a very heavy fine, although, to be honest, fines alone would seem rather insufficient, especially given other clubs have had points deducted for similar sort of charges. There could be a transfer restriction imposed, similar to the UEFA sanctions levied in the past. And the expulsion from the Premier League is technically possible, although politically complicated. But even a partial conviction could lead to a huge points deduction. So, what does that mean for West Ham United? Well, it's obvious, I guess. As of the 25-26 Premier League season continues, the relegation battle is quite tight. And crucially, PSR cases could directly influence the table at the end of the season. We all know that along with Burnley and Wolves, we are in the deepest of trouble with relegation threatening. But clubs like Nottingham Forest and Spurs aren't out of danger just yet. But why would Man City receive such a high points deduction of between 40 to 60 points? Well, that's on the assumption they get found guilty on all 115 charges. But as I've said, even if they get found guilty of, let's say, half, then if you compare the number of charges and points deductions received by Everton and Nottingham Forest, then proportionately, Man City could still find themselves in serious danger of relegation with the number of points that they could be deducted. However, if they were to receive a moderate deduction, say 10 or 15 points, then of course relegation wouldn't be a threat, but it would push them out of European contention and of course the race for the Premier League title. Now, there could of course be a delayed punishment. This would not affect the current relegation fight, but it would influence next season's table. It could also impact on transfer plans for all clubs involved. But why wait? If the verdict is to be announced before the end of this season, then I guess the punishment that goes with it will have already been discussed and agreed. So why delay? But it's unlikely that there would be a decision on whether punishment. But it's unlikely, that there would be a delayed decision on the punishment if it comes into effect. Of course, Man City could get away with it, and there will be no punishment at all. If City are cleared, then the relegation battle remains as it is, and West Ham, Burnley, and Wolves must survive on merit alone. But wouldn't we prefer that? Would we not prefer to actually survive on our own ability? It would be a far easier pill to swallow and would keep our reputation and credibility intact, or what's left of it. But I don't know. I guess there are going to be some fans that won't care. If we avoid relegation even through PSR rules affecting other clubs, would it matter? I don't know. You decide.